Good afternoon, everybody. Anthony Aniano here from RotoBaller Radio and RotoBaller.com with the Week 17 sleeper and value plays for your fantasy football season. Special thanks to everybody who has watched all season long, whether it's been the waiver wire or the sleeper and value play videos. But thank you to all of you for watching as you now get ready for what should be your championship final. Guys, don't forget, head to RotoBaller.com. Sign up now for all the great content there. Sign up for that premium pass. Team sync, tools, lineup optimizers, you name it. RotoBaller.com, the place to be, whether it's football, basketball, or getting ready for fantasy baseball season, as well as sports betting and all sorts of great other content. Download the app for free. Get up-to-the-minute news courtesy of RotoBaller.com. Like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel, and follow me on Twitter at @Aniano_Fantasy. All right. Back to the sleeper and value plays, Week 17. We start at the quarterback position. And there's a few choices here this week, no doubt about it. We have Gardner Minshew against the Saints. We have Brock Purdy against the Raiders. Both terrific values at 5,500. But the third choice, and the one I'll feature today, is Mike White returning for the New York Jets at the Seattle Seahawks. $5,400 on DraftKings. When healthy, averaging 20.3 fantasy points per game. And he goes against the Seattle defense that is 22nd in the league in points allowed to opposing quarterbacks with 20.7 fantasy points per game. And they've allowed 22 passing touchdowns to opposing QBs. Okay, they have allowed 23 or more points in each of their last 4 games defensively. And here's the catch for me. Mike White, a great connection with Wilson, Elijah Moore a little bit involved, Bam White. This offense was lost with Zach Wilson on the center, played obviously much better with Mike White. And Seattle, although 22nd in points allowed to quarterbacks, are tied for the 6th most passing touchdowns allowed this season with those 22. So you can throw touchdowns against the Seattle defense, and I expect Mike White to do so. Garrett Wilson, Tyler Conklin, and others in the mix. At the running back position, 2 running backs to take a look at this week in the feature of value plays and sleepers. Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders against the Cleveland Browns. Brian Robinson is 5,200 on DraftKings, averaging 9.7 points per game in a DK scoring format. He's got 15 or more carries in 5 out of his last 6 games and 10 or more fantasy points in 4 out of his last 6. And it's a smash matchup against the Cleveland Browns run defense, which is currently 30th in the league against opposing running backs, allowing 27.3 points per game to running backs in a PPR format with 18 total touchdowns. Of those 18 touchdowns, Cleveland has allowed to opposing running backs, 15 of them have been rushing, 3 receiving. Those 15 rushing touchdowns allowed are the 3rd most in the league. Brian Robinson in line for a nice matchup and should be able to cross the goal line at least once against this Browns defense for the Washington Commanders. My second running back, Tyler Algier of the Atlanta Falcons versus the Arizona Cardinals. 5,300 on DraftKings, 9.5 points per game in that DK scoring format. He's averaging 20 points per game over his last 2 games. Week 16, 15.7. Week 15, 25.6 fantasy points as he has emerged as the go-to running back of the Atlanta Falcons with 35 carries over those 2 games. Arizona is 28th in the league in defending opposing running backs in PPR formats with 26.6 fantasy points per game allowed to the position and 17 running back touchdowns. Of those 17 touchdowns allowed to running backs, 12 have been on the ground, 5 through the air. Those 12 rushing touchdowns allowed are 9th most in the league. Again, Tyler Algier, give me that 15 to 20 carries and a good opportunity to score a touchdown. At the wide receiver position, 2 wide receivers to be mindful of. Jahan Dotson of the Washington Commanders against that Cleveland Browns defense. Now, Cleveland's very good against opposing wide receivers in general. PPR formats, they're 6th best in the league in preventing points to opposing wide receivers. Only 30.7 points per game. But wide receivers do have 14 touchdowns this season, tied for 9th most in the league. Okay, so 14 out of the 19 touchdown passes Cleveland has allowed has gone to wide receivers. And like I said, 14 touchdowns to wide receivers, 9th most in the league. Now, Jahan Dotson is 4,600 on DraftKings, yet averaging 11.7 points per game in a DK scoring format. He's got 7 touchdowns on the season in 10 games played. Of those 7 touchdowns, he scored them in 6 games. Okay, including 16 or more fantasy points in his last 3 games, including a touchdown in each. Jahan Dotson is a goal line, red zone target consistently. Regardless, in the beginning of the season, it was Carson Wentz finding him in the end zone. Then it was Tyler Heineke. As we know, Washington going back to Carson Wentz. I don't have that as affecting Jahan Dotson all that much. Dotson has had success with both Wentz and Heineke this season. Cleveland secondary good, but they do give up touchdowns to those wide receivers. Jahan Dotson, another opportunity to score this week. My second wide receiver is George Pickens of the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. 5,100 on DraftKings, 9.9 fantasy points per game. 5 out of his last 7 games with 10 or more fantasy points. Baltimore is 22nd in the league defending opposing wide receivers with 35.6 fantasy points per game, and they have allowed 11 wide receiver touchdowns. And my final play of the week in the values and sleeper plays for week 17 at the tight end position is Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears at the Detroit Lions. $4,500 on DraftKings, averaging 8.1 fantasy points per game. He's got 24 targets in his last 4 games. He's got 5 touchdowns on the season. And Detroit is 25th in the league against opposing tight ends. 14.2 points per game in a PPR format allowed to opposing tight ends. And Detroit has allowed 10 touchdowns to the tight end position. That is tied for the most touchdowns allowed to the tight end in the league. So Cole Kmet, who's been a red zone target of Justin Fields when Justin Fields not running it in himself. Okay, Cole Kmet against the Detroit Lions defense that just does not cover the tight end well and certainly doesn't cover tight ends in the end zone well, as evidenced by 10 touchdowns tied for most in the league to opposing tight ends. To summarize the Week 17 sleepers and value plays, quarterback Mike White of the Jets at the Seattle Seahawks, running backs Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders versus the Cleveland Browns, and Tyler Algier of the Atlanta Falcons against the Arizona Cardinals. At wide receiver, Jahan Dotson of Washington, again versus the Cleveland Browns, George Pickens of the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens, and my tight end pick of the week is Cole Kmet of the Bears at the Detroit Lions. Give me a follow on Twitter at Aniano Fantasy. Make sure you tune into SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio each and every day. Look for RotoBaller Radio with Real Talk Refs, Josh Hayes, myself, Scott Hangle coming at you all week long, 6 to 7 a.m. And don't forget, like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel. Head to rotoballer.com, sign up for that premium pass, save 10% at checkout using the promotional code ACES. As always, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time right here on RotoBaller Radio.